Welcome to UpTalk, Starr. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, we're all supposed to be in the same room today, but we're not. I'm in Edmonton, Marcus back in Halifax, and you're at home. That's just the way it
That's right.
works. Thanks to technology, I should have a shout out to Scott Bailey here where I'm staying. He lent me his laptop because mine wasn't working. So shout out to him for helping this happen. Um, Starr, we're recording this a few days after Hurricane Fiona went through the East Coast. So, I mean, I have to ask, how was that experience for you? How are you and yours? All that stuff.
We fared pretty well here. I live in a townhouse, so it's pretty secure, a brick townhouse. We didn't have any property damage. We lost power for a couple of days, but we're back up and running now. The saddest thing for me, though, I mean, beyond all the devastation for everyone's been experiencing and the trauma of living through this for a lot of people,
Yeah,
but the Shubenacadie tree didn't survive.
I saw that.
Yeah, and I love that tree. I actually did a story when I was at CTV. It was a special sweeps item, and I went back through my files and found it and reposted it on Facebook. And it brought a tear to my eye looking at the story and remembering just how significant that tree was for so many people.
Tell me about this tree because I don't know much about this tree.
Oh, okay. I'd love to
Tell our
tell you about
listeners,
the tree.
drop some knowledge. Here we go.
So the tree was an oak tree, and it stood all alone in a giant sparse field. And it was just a total symbol of strength. I referred to the tree as a she, so she was a girl to me. So she
Perfect.
was a wonderful symbol of strength for me. And where she was on my travel route was the halfway point. So I'm from Pictou County and I live in Halifax. And I would drive back and forth, and every time I'd see the tree, I'd know I'm halfway home. Either
Right.
way, because both ends were home. And she just always spoke to me because of that, and through all the seasons. I loved her spring, summer, winter, and fall. Everybody knew that I loved her, so much so that one of my friends gave me a birthday present that was a picture of the tree through the 4 seasons. She stopped and captured the pictures herself so that I would have something completely unique.
Nice.
So the tree had great meaning for me, and I never really understood why until I did the story.
Yeah.
And my grandfather saw the story, and he ended up telling me that when he was following behind the ambulance that was carrying my grandmother from Pictou County to Halifax, that's right where the ambulance turned off its lights.
Wow.
And like, that's pretty cool.
Hmm.
To think that is where the ambulance was when Nan took her last breath.
Wow.
And I never knew that story, and just always knew that there was something about that tree that drew me to it. Anyway, when we did the story, we had response from all over the world. People who
Really?
had the tree tattooed on them, people who got engaged under the tree.
Wow.
People had stories about it. So it was a spectacular tree, and the fact that it's gone is really, really sad.
I know what you mean when you mention like landmarks when you're traveling home from somewhere, because I'm from New Minas from the valley. So whenever we would travel from Halifax, and whenever I travel from Halifax, just when you're coming into Avonport, almost on that hill, and this is the Bay of Fundy in front of you, you can see that point. That's sort of my halfway point, or my point to know, I'm sort of coming into home for sure. But yeah, that tree was special for sure.
Very special.
All right. So you mentioned it. You grew up in Pictou County. What was that like for you?
It was great. It was a wonderful place to grow up. My parents ran the local grocery store. My grandfather built a grocery store, and then they ran it. So we were very connected to the community. The grocery store was right next door to the volunteer fire department. So we took all the calls for the fire department at the store. So it was really kind of a quintessential.
You took the calls
town.
at the store?
We did. We took the calls at the store. So when I was working at the store as a teenager, the phone would ring, and sometimes it was Mrs. Higgins calling in her grocery order, which is really funny, Sean, because, I'm in my mid-50s. And when I was a teenager, we actually took orders over the phone, wrote it down, I'd go through the store, put the grocery order together, ring it through, put it in a box, and we'd deliver it. Who knew that what we were doing then would become
Yeah.
what people have done, like what the big grocery giants have done to get them
It's all
through the
come back
pandemic and
around.
through COVID. Yeah. And so when the phone would ring, sometimes it would be someone calling in an order, and sometimes it would be Agnes who says, "Quick, get the trucks here. My house is on fire."
Wow. That's crazy.
My
What?
grandfather and my dad drove the truck, so I'd just holler, "Agnes's house is on fire." And they'd spring into action. And then my grandma was the person who started the phone tree. So she had like 6
Right.
people she'd call, and then they'd call people. And yeah, long before pagers or cell phones.
Man. Yeah. That's crazy. Things have
Mhm.
changed for sure. What growing up, what led you or what steered you towards a career in journalism?
I think I was just born with a love of reading and writing. Um, Mom and Dad tell a story about when I started reading the paper when I was so little that I couldn't actually, my arms weren't big enough to open up a whole paper. The
Yeah.
paper was too big, that I would lay it out on the floor in the living room to read the newspaper. Um, I just always loved reading and writing and asking questions and getting answers.
Mm.
You have to be curious to be a good journalist. And one thing I am to the core is curious. So I
Yeah.
was in grade 4. A classmate and I were chosen to be the roving reporters for West Pictou Consolidated Elementary School.
Nice.
And we had a weekly column in the Pictou Advocate, which is still printed today.
Hmm.
And it was called Bits and Pieces. So we went around and interviewed the teachers and the students. And I guess I got bit by the bug then.
Huh. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you had a 23-year career at ATV and CTV.
Hmm.
I think I'm right. Yeah. I mean, you must have some incredible memories from that time.
I
I know,
do.
I know Janice does. I talk to Janice Landry all the time. She's been on the podcast a couple of times, but what was that like for you? How special was that for you?
Oh, it was remarkable. It was to sound cliche, but it was a dream job for sure.
Yeah.
Having grown up in that small town environment in the rural area of
Yeah.
Nova Scotia, we had 2 channels. We had, CTV, ATV, and CBC. And growing up, like the TV was on live at 5 and into the 6
Yeah.
o'clock news. And
That's
Live
right.
at 5 just turned 40. I was just on Live at 5 last week.
I saw that.
They did an
I saw that.
anniversary show, so they invited me and Bruce to deliver an intro from the studio. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
But so for 40 years, I mean, the show was part of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Me too.
it was, and you feel like you know all those people. So when I had the opportunity to walk into the newsroom and see Dave Wright, Bill Jessam, Steve Murphy, it was just like, wow, big time, I'm here. And
Yeah.
and for the next 23 years, it was a wonderful opportunity, one that I look back on and think, I'm very grateful that I had the chance to experience that.
Nice.
And I had the chance to interview celebrities and sports stars and do some really cool things like fly a helicopter and drive a monster truck and, all kinds of really cool experiences. But it's, when I think back, it's really the stories of when people opened up and welcomed me into their homes and
Yeah.
shared, their own fears or struggles and challenges that truly resonated with me. And once I started doing On Your Side, I did the consumer segment for a
Right.
number of years. Um, I really realized that a lot of people just wanted to be listened to,
Mm.
validated. So people who are experiencing, trouble in any way, consumer wise or family wise or work wise, I ended up hearing from everyone who had problems. And what I discovered is you don't have to know how to solve someone's problems. You just have to listen to them most of the time.
Yeah.
And it's funny, but that's a skill set that
It's a
I
hard
use
skill
every
set.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I still use it every day because I think one of the things with mental illness is people are often so concerned they're going to say the wrong thing or
Right.
give the wrong advice that they don't say anything.
Exactly.
And that's the worst thing you can do. We know that. But just listening to people who are struggling is a really big part of the process.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
I've mentioned that before a couple times. People, I think people do, they don't know what to say. They think they have to have something special to say, and they don't. They can't think of it, so they don't say anything. So the person ends up feeling forgotten or isolated even more. It's just important. You just say hello. Like
mhm,
you just act normal. Say hello. Ask how they're doing. Um, we don't need you to say something, you know, special
profound.
to us. Oh yeah, that's right. Or profound. Like it doesn't need to be that way. It's just knowing that you're there and saying hello means everything, right?
Hmm. Yeah. So
Uh,
I really enjoyed that part of the experience at CTV.
Now, with that though, I mean, obviously you're also reporting on not so nice things.
Mm,
So, would you have been there during Swiss Air?
yes.
All right. So
Yeah.
that's sort of a big event, right? How did you? I mean, going out and having to deliver those stories. How did you then protect yourself from from getting too upset over it or too connected with it?
Hmm.
Did you
I
even think
think,
of that then?
well, no,
No.
no,
Yeah,
because that wasn't something that we covered in journalism school.
that's right. Yeah.
It wasn't something that we talked about. Um, but I think like with many things at the beginning of my career, things bothered me. And then I just learned to detach, I guess,
Yeah.
desensitized myself, would look at things as, this is part of my job. I have to be neutral. I
Yeah.
can't, I can't show a bias in one way or another. And there were many stories where that was a struggle. Um,
Mm,
Not just the big ones like the
right.
Swiss Airs and the 9/11s, but um, you know, being on the scene when a body was recovered from a lake
Yeah.
and seeing that, never wanting to see that, would never look to see it, but just happened to be there when it's happening, and then processing that um, later. And I guess that's I've always I don't know if it's a positive or a negative. It's probably a little bit of both, but I've always been pretty good at parking stuff,
Yeah.
detaching from it, like when it's happening, thinking, okay, I'll process that later. Right now, I need to ask the questions or, think about the story, or I need to take control of the situation if it's a personal thing that's happening, and then
Right.
deal with the consequences of it later. So
Now, did you actually do that? Did you find that you actually did take some time and process it later?
I found that I had to.
Yeah.
It
Eventually you
wasn't a
have to.
matter of did you
Yeah.
want to. It was a matter of, oh crap, like, yeah, the story's done. This is over. Um, and the funny thing about TV is when you see me or Janice or whoever it is in
Yeah.
someone's living room talking to them, you think, oh my gosh, that must have been so difficult to talk to that mom who just lost her daughter,
Yeah.
or to talk to that, father who just lost a child. What you're seeing as a viewer is only a very small snippet of what has actually taken place in that interaction. From the
Right.
moment you open the door and are welcomed into a person's home, there's a whole lot of stuff that happens before the camera starts rolling and once the camera is turned off. Um, so yeah, it was a difficult job in a lot of ways, and it certainly did take its toll.
Now I know that from your job with CTV and ATV, you had the opportunity to host a lot of fundraising galas. You got to
Hmm.
venture into that. Um, and I believe I saw you once host for the Tema Foundation
Yeah,
at one of the Halifax. So, and I closely work with them. Love them to death. Love the Conters.
ditto.
Um, yeah, no, they're special. So I read that a special relationship you had was with the Special Olympics,
Hmm.
and that at a gala in 2013, you told a very personal story, which sort of solidified your relationship with them and why they were so
Hmm.
special. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Not at all. No, thank you for asking.
Yeah.
So my sister, I have two sisters.
Mhm.
Stacy and Shannon. And Stacy and I were both born in the same year. We're both 1968. Um, so I was born in February. She was born in December on Christmas Day, actually. She
Oh,
was
there
our
you go.
Christmas gift. And Stacy's mentally challenged and has struggled throughout her life. She lives in a supervised living program now in Pictou County. She has a fantastic life. She's more social than I am.
Mm.
She lives with a roommate and they have 24-hour supervision, so counselors who come in on rotating shifts. And Stacy got involved with Special Olympics at a young age. And from the moment she became an athlete, I became a fan. And Stacy went on to win, oh boy, I'd say 100 anyway, medals
Wow.
through the years with swimming.
Hmm.
And then she traveled across the country to compete and made new friends and had new experiences and really found a sense of purpose and really had a reason for everyone in our family and her community to rally behind her,
Right.
which is so important. You know, I think about the satisfaction and the validation that we get from work, for instance, or doing something very well at work. And Stacy didn't have a lot of that in her life, so Special Olympics gave that to her.
Yeah.
And I joined the board of Special Olympics and hosted their events for a very long time. And then one year the board asked if I'd deliver the keynote. And I said, no, what? No way, Jose. No, I introduce people and I share other people's stories. And my story is not extraordinary. It's a regular story. Like, no, it wouldn't be compelling. Long story short, as you know, I ended up doing the keynote and said I'd only do it if Stacy could come to the stage with me. So they got a big box
Nice.
for Stacy to stand on because she's like 4 foot nothing and I'm 5'8". And we stood at the podium together and delivered a keynote that resonated with people in the room.
Hmm.
And I just was filled with joy and a feeling that Stacy and I were able to connect with people and open their eyes in a way that they otherwise would never have experienced. And I realized I want to feel like that more often.
Had you been
My
having
story wasn't.
feelings? Had you been having feelings like that before this, or had you been looking for a change?
I felt like I wanted to. I knew that I wanted to make a change. I knew I wasn't going to stay at CTV until I retired.
Okay.
I was there for 23 years. I was the co-host and the producer of Live at 5. Where was my next step if I
Right.
wanted to stay in Nova Scotia, which I knew that I did. And I didn't have a desire to become a news director,
Right.
take on, all that added responsibility. So yeah, I knew that I wasn't going to spend my entire career at CTV. So
Hmm.
when this opportunity happened, and people came forward and said, like, I never knew about this, and you've given me a new appreciation for mentally challenged adults and the importance of Special Olympics,
Yeah.
and they had new volunteers volunteering on the Monday after the event, and I thought, you know what, I could really use my voice for helping organizations that
Yeah.
need help and need a voice. And I went to talk to Mark Surratt, who ran Knightsbridge Robertson Surratt at the time, and just said, I'm ready for a change. And I had this feeling, and I want to figure out a way to feel that way all the time and to feel like the work I'm doing is really making a difference and matters. And it was like the stars aligned, which is corny to say since my name is Starr, but the stars aligned.
Yeah.
And he said, you're never going to believe this, but there's an opening at the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia. Would you have any desire or passion to work in the field of mental health? And it was like, yeah, of course
Yeah.
I do. Of course I do. I had mental illness on both sides of my family. And what I hadn't said out loud to anyone up until then was I live with mental illness myself and had spent many years trying to keep it secret because
Yeah.
I was embarrassed and I was ashamed and didn't want people to think that the person who was on their TV interviewing the experts and
Right.
giving them information may not be as capable as they thought I was. Um, So yeah, I kept my cards very close to my chest.
Mm.
I made sure nobody knew that I went to see a therapist. Um, this just made me think of a story that I shared years later. At the time when I was at CTV, I was on antidepressants and was so concerned that somebody would find out that I was taking medication for mental illness that when I would empty one prescription bottle before I got the next one, I would pick my name off the label with a fingernail file, scrape it and scrape it and scrape it until I removed my name before I'd throw it in the garbage.
Right.
Because I thought, what if someone at the landfill, what if the bag ripped open and the pill bottle fell out and somebody saw it, and my last name was Dobson at the time, and looked at it and thought, Starr Dobson, Prozac, what the heck? Starr Dobson's
Right.
crazy, for lack of a better term. Um, that's what I thought. And when
Well,
I shared that story
that's what
out
our brain
loud,
tells us. That's what our
it
brain
is
tells
what our
us.
brain tells us. And when
Yeah.
I shared that story out loud, it was at Festival of Trees several years ago. I had so many people come up to talk to me afterwards, and they all had stories to tell me that were so similar. Oh, Star, don't use a nail file. All I do is soak them in the bathroom sink overnight. I put them in the sink before I go to bed, and in the morning the labels peel right off.
Mm.
Or I have a Sobeys bag in my closet, and I've never thrown one of my pill bottles in the garbage. All my pill bottles are just all hidden away in the closet. And I realized, wow, I thought I was the only person. And
Isn't that crazy that
yeah.
your brain makes you think that you're the only person
Mm,
on the earth that has
hmm.
this issue? It's so, but you believe it because it's so believable.
It is, yeah.
But
So anyway, that's what brought me to the Mental Health Foundation, and the rest is history. So I was looking for them, and they were looking for someone like me, and I was nervous that I didn't have the skills to be a president and CEO. I was, like I said, a producer and a co-host,
mm.
um, but everything was so transferable
Well,
because
you mentioned that. I
fundraising.
read that you said
Mm,
your skills as a journalist sort of seamlessly went into this,
mhm.
went into this new role. So how so?
Relationships and communication, the two
Right.
most important things.
Yeah.
Um, those are, you're either able to do those things, build relationships and communicate effectively, or you're not.
Yeah.
Um, I had no experience building budgets or making strategic plans operational, or any of those things that would be high up on my list of responsibilities. But
Right.
you can learn all that stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. That innate ability to build strong relationships is
Hmm.
so important, especially in this field.
Hmm. In this field, and especially with donors and
Yeah,
sponsors,
exactly.
and people are going to give you money in hopes of changing the way people think.
All right. So that brings us to the foundation. So, Mental
Mhm.
Health Foundation of Nova Scotia. What is it? What do you guys do? Because there's probably a lot of confusion for
There's a ton
people
of
that,
confusion.
yeah,
There's a ton. So I've actually been the keynote speaker at events, and will be introduced as Star from the Mental Health Association, because they're just so close.
right,
And we support the Mental Health Association. Like, they do some really great work.
right,
And they have a provincial office, and then they have all their branches all throughout the province. So, the ED of CMHA Nova Scotia and I are friends, and
right.
we we support them. They provide great service. So, but there is a lot of confusion. So the foundation is a fundraiser. That's the big difference. We don't provide services. We raise funds all year round to support the people who do provide the services in our communities all across the province and in our hospitals.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a United Way model, but specifically for mental health, for mental illness and addiction.
Hmm.
So it's our job to raise as much money as we can, and then we give all that money away through our community grants process. So twice a year we open up the call for grants, and people apply, and when I first started, we were giving away about $150,000 a year in community grants, and last year we awarded $2 million.
Wow.
So it speaks to the demand, the growing demand,
Right.
and it speaks to the fact that Nova Scotians are aware that mental illness and addiction, you know, it impacts so many of us, if not directly, indirectly for sure. So yeah, we've just been growing and growing and growing over the years, and giving more and more grants. And right now, actually, I just finished this weekend while the power was off, so I could only do it during the daylight hours here at my
Yeah.
desk with the blinds up, grant scoring, and there were 100 grant applications to score. So
Really?
that means looking at them all and scoring them, writing comments. And while I'm doing that, there are other volunteers across the province who are doing the same thing. And then we put all our scores together. They get tabulated so that the grants get ranked, and then we come together and have an open discussion about geography, demographics, different types of mental illnesses and addiction,
Right.
to make sure that we're that we're touching everything, diversity, and then we award the grants. So we do that twice a year, and
So,
it's the best part of what we do.
so for this round that you just did, so how many applicants did you say you got? 100?
Just over 100, and then we have a vetting process where we'll remove any that don't meet the initial
Right.
few questions, like does it pertain specifically to mental health or mental illness and addiction? If it does, great, it goes through. If it doesn't, then no, it doesn't.
So about how many of those would end up getting a grant?
You know what? Used to be very low numbers because
Yeah.
we didn't have as much money as the need, but now we are able to fund. We could fund all the grant requests, almost all the grant requests, but here's the really interesting part that I'm very proud of. We don't,
Right.
because we didn't change our criteria once we get more money, which I think it would have been very easy to do that, to say, oh, well, now we have access to $1 million. Let's give away $1 million in grants. What we still do is stick to those criteria, the criterion that we have set out. So we're not funding grants that score
Right.
50% or 60%.
Well, you're
You know,
maintaining that integrity
you're darn
of the
right. Yeah,
program, right? Which is
yeah,
important.
yeah.
But what I was sort of coming around to is that must be hard to look at somebody, could be somebody's passion project,
hmm
right? And it must be really hard to make that decision, yay or nay.
It is. It's very difficult in some scenarios, but it's vitally important.
Yeah.
Like donors' dollars, people are giving us money and trusting us to make the best decisions, to
Yeah.
put those dollars to work in the communities with the programs that need it the most. So they're
Well,
important decisions. You're not just looking at a grant application and scanning it and saying yes or no. Like
yeah.
you're reading it and rereading it.
I mean, what you said is so important because you and I have both seen foundations in many different areas sort of fall into question integrity wise through whatever. And it's just for a foundation that relies on charitable donations, it's a full-time job alone just to make sure that you are not developing partnerships or relationships with anybody or any one group that could damage the integrity of the foundation down the road. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Oh, 100%.
It's
100%.
it's like I say, that even that alone is hard,
Mm.
right?
Yep. No, it is. It's a big responsibility.
Yeah, for sure it is. So, okay. So you guys are a fundraising body.
hmm
If someone just in error, just because they happen to see the name, if they call the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia looking for
hmm
actual help,
hmm
do you guys have resources that then you just point them in the right direction if they happen to come through you?
We certainly do. So, and that happens a lot.
Yeah, it must. It
It
must happen
does.
a lot.
If you Google mental health Nova Scotia, I'm not sure if it still is, but our foundation was always the first thing to pop up. So if
Right.
imagine you're in crisis,
Yeah.
you haven't looked into the field of mental health before, and then you're Googling it and our number pops up. So we do get a lot of emails, we get a lot of Facebook messages, and we get a lot of phone calls from people who are in crisis. And we have a process in place. So all of our staff has mental health first aid training. Most of our staff has Safe Talk, which is a suicide assistance
Okay.
training.
Right.
And we listen. We find out if the person is at risk of harming themselves or someone else.
Right.
If it's a crisis situation, those are the first questions we ask, which is really important because some people are scared to ask that question because they think,
Absolutely.
oh, I'm not going to ask if they're thinking about suicide because I'll give them the idea, which, there's
Yeah.
nothing farther from the truth. So that's one of the first questions we ask. Are you thinking of self-harm or suicide? And if the
And you have
answer
to ask it
is
bluntly. You have to like just come out
just
with
like
it.
that, yep,
Yeah,
just
you
like that.
do. Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, then we get their information and we tell them to call 911, go to an emergency room, or call the mental health crisis line. Um, we keep their information so that if something happens, we can get in touch with people to help them.
Mm.
If they say no, then we find out what it is they're looking for. And yeah, we're very fortunate because we work with so many community groups awarding them money and having them
Right.
apply that we know a lot about the resources that exist in our community. So we direct people in the right spot.
Can you give me an example? You can be specific or vague, doesn't matter, but just
Mhm.
an example of some of the types of groups or some of the groups that you have given a grant to in the past, or that you
Mhm.
give grants to. Just give
Sure.
somebody an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some of the big ones that we support, like the more common names, would be Canadian Mental Health Association. So
Right.
CMHA Halifax Dartmouth, CMHA Colchester East Hants, CMHA Annapolis Valley, um, Big Brothers Big Sisters we award money to, Kids Help Phone, Love, which is Leave Out Violence,
Hmm.
the Schizophrenia Society, Eating Disorders Nova Scotia. Um, we support addictions programs, so the Marguerite Center, um, Care. We support Roots of Empathy, which is a program that teaches kids about how to feel, what it means to be empathetic.
Right.
And then we support really small organizations who meet in a church basement every
Yeah.
second Tuesday from 2:30 to 3:30, and the church gives them the space for free, but we give them the money so that they can have coffee and donuts while they're
Yeah.
there, and they get together and provide each other with peer support. And it's a situation where if they didn't have that place to go on that date, they wouldn't leave the house.
Right.
So we support grants that are $1,000 a year right up to $25,000 a year. So there's a little bit of everything in there. And as you know, the mental illness is such a huge umbrella.
It is. Yeah.
We're talking about everything from PTSD to anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, ADHD, autism, dementia, and then addiction in there, uh, eating disorders, which I mentioned earlier. So
It's a big portfolio.
covers a lot. Covers a lot.
It totally does. Um, what are some of the internal initiatives that you guys have going on? I know that you just wrapped up the whole kitchen party
Mhm.
initiative that you had. Or can you talk about some of the initiatives like that you do throughout the year?
Yeah, so the kitchen party is a great one to talk about because we are arm's length for that. That's an initiative that picks us and says, we want to
Oh,
raise money for you.
oh,
So we're
nice.
not organizing the kitchen party. We're not, trying to find the performers or figuring out the venue. We're basically showing up and accepting a donation on
That's
behalf of the
awesome.
organization. Yep. And most times we'll be asked to provide volunteers, so we'll do that too. So
What's the organization
Heather,
that ran that?
it was the ultimate online Nova Scotia kitchen party.
Oh, it is
So
its own
during
thing.
COVID, yeah. So Heather Cameron Thomas, Thompson, pardon me, she started it, and 1 year in, they had an anniversary, and she just reached out and said, Starr, we'd like to support mental health because we know that everybody's mental health is struggling and music is so important for
Yeah,
your mental wellness. So we said, that's great. And they held an event and raised like, it was over $15,000 for us. And
wow.
then we've ended up being our charity of choice for a number of events that they do. So they were doing in-person kitchen parties, so they chose us to support.
So that's all
And
from that group, that Facebook group that started during COVID.
you're darn right. Yep. That's
Okay,
where it all
I
came from.
gotcha.
Yeah. So, and we have a form on our website, community fundraiser toolkit. So anybody who thinks they'd like to fundraise for the Mental Health Foundation and comes
Oh,
up with a good idea, just, they contact us, fill out the form, tell us what they're looking at, and we move forward with it as long as it's in line with our mission and our vision. We have like Zumba instructors who do Zumba-thons for us. We have people who create products that want to donate back a portion of sales to the Mental Health Foundation. We have walks and runs and bake sales and everything in between. So we call those third-party fundraisers.
right.
So it's, someone else is doing it. And then from our perspective at the foundation, we have three main events. We do November Gala, which has always been a festival of trees. This year it's something different.
Right.
We do a different stage of mind.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Puts community leaders on the stage with a microphone in their hand. They have to sing. And then we do Let's Keep Talking, which is coming up in October. So that one really celebrates the achievements and the successes of people who are living with mental illness and giving back to their communities.
That's awesome. I mean, so you've been doing this now for like 8 years, pretty much.
Yeah, 9 years. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, looking back now, I mean, how have you found it? Was it what you thought it would be?
No.
No, no.
No. Well, when I was leaving CTV, I was like, oh, it's going to be so nice not to be on call 24/7 all the time. Well,
Yeah,
you're on call 24/7 all the time. And it's not just my job, it's who I am.
yeah,
It's who you are. I mean, nobody would choose to work in this field unless they had a real desire and passion to help.
yeah, that's true.
And it attracts a lot of people with lived experience, which is another interesting perspective to throw in there.
Yeah,
No, so the job is part of who I am, I guess.
yeah.
And I do love that,
Yeah,
but it can be difficult sometimes, because we're dealing with tough things like self-harm, like suicide.
yeah. I mean, and I want to touch on that. First, I want to ask you, what have your observations been during this whole crazy COVID time, as far as how it's affected the foundation and how the foundation does its work?
Mhm. Well, it's like it's turned us upside down
Right.
because of, well, uncertainty. Uncertainty is so it's one of the it's probably my biggest challenge to deal with
Oh,
uncertainty.
certainly.
I like to know what's happening tomorrow, what's happening next month.
Yeah.
What do I have to do to make sure this is the best it can be, and not knowing that has been really difficult. So yeah, it's turned us upside down. It's made us think outside the box. It's made us take risks that we wouldn't normally have taken, which have all, knock on wood, worked out well
Tell
for
me,
us.
tell me about one risk that you had to take.
Well, going virtual with an event.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good
That
one.
was a big risk for us to go from an event where we had a luncheon for 800 people and a gala the next night for 800 people and say, oh crap, we really need this money. But
Right.
how are we going to get it and engage people? What are we going to do? We did it. We engaged people. We made money. It worked. We got through it. And then we had to do it again the next year. Like that's
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like we got through it and we're like, wow, like that was remarkable. We did it. Like people
Yeah.
really stepped up. They supported us and they believed in us. And let's never have to do that again. And then it's like, what? COVID is still happening? And a whole other year has gone by. And we have to reinvent this and do it again.
Yeah.
So that was a risk. Another one was deciding not to have an event when it didn't feel the time was not right, and it meant that we were going to take a hit on our bottom line because we went a full year without doing a different stage of mind,
Right.
and it brings in anywhere from 200 to 350, $400,000. So you
Really?
can't just all of a sudden say no, we're not going to do that.
Wow,
But that's what we had to do. We had to make the decision. And we did it and ended up working out for us.
man. Um, so you mentioned it. I mean, obviously, you are dealing with being in your line of work. You're dealing with everybody's worst day, or they may be having, right? And you're observing and talking to people about unfortunate events all the time that may have happened to them, trying to help out. And the theme of this podcast is own your growth, taking responsibility for your own well-being. Um, that in light of the things that you may naturally struggle with on top of what you do for work, what are some of the things that you do or that you have put into your daily routine, specifically to maintain your wellness?
Mm. The number one thing I did, and I had just started this before the pandemic, so I started in June. I just said, like, I need to invest in my mental health. Like, I need to do it.
Yeah.
And I had been involved with therapy, different therapists throughout the years, and I'd go see them for like 6 sessions or 8 sessions, and then it would start costing a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I would think, oh, I'm through the crisis. Thank you very much for helping me. I'm out of
Yeah.
here.
I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, until
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
12 or 18 months later, when I'd be like ready to fall in the pit again, and
Yeah.
recognize that I was withdrawing socially. I wasn't sleeping. I was drinking more than I would normally be drinking. I had a short fuse. I was having really negative thoughts. Then I seek out the therapist again and go see the therapist for 6 to 8 sessions until I get over that hump and say, thanks, see you later.
Yeah.
And
That's
what
the
I
cycle.
realized, what I finally realized is, I was just putting a Band-Aid on something that
Yeah.
needed a lot more attention. So in June, it was 2 years, just this past June, I
Mhm.
started going to therapy every week, Tuesday, 3:30 to 4:30 in Dartmouth, and it's in my calendar, and it just says no meetings, please. And I need to shut down my computer
Mhm.
and leave the office or leave the house if I'm working from home at 3 o'clock. And I know that my work day is ending at 3 o'clock on Tuesday because I'm going to my session from 3:30 to 4:30. And then I'm going to need decompression time after
Yeah.
that. And I'm just going to need to take a deep breath. And I did it. I've done it.
How long you been doing that now?
It's been over 2 years. And my therapist and I have just changed to every second Tuesday. And like, I don't know how long that's going to last for. I'm in for as long as it needs to be. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it was making that commitment to invest that time in me, that money in me. Sean,
Right.
it is, it's
Yeah.
$210 a session.
Right. Yeah.
And your insurance like my insurance covers the first $1,200.
Right.
And
And
I'm
that's a good one. That if
it is a good
that's
one.
a high end. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
incredibly, incredibly, incredibly fortunate that I'm at a point in my life where I'm able to afford that. I
Yeah.
mean, it's significant, it's like it's a very large car payment or a very large,
Yeah. And
or
people, it makes me sad to think of the amount of people that are choosing between getting groceries or going to see the therapist.
me
Right.
too. Me too. And I did that for a lot of years where I'd say, oh no, the kids need this, or, I
Right.
need, there were always other priorities. And I just realized, you know what, this isn't working for me. I'm finding I'm right back into that really crappy state of mind where
Yeah.
I end up every 12 months. Then all of a sudden I was like, oh, this was only 8 months ago I was there. And then it's like, oh, I think this was just 6 months ago. Anyway, it's taken a shit ton of hard work.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the hour-long session. It's
No,
everything you do when you
that's
come out
what
of it.
I mean, my listeners are probably sick of hearing it from me. That's what it's about. It's about putting in the hard work and realizing that the hard work does not end.
hmm
It's every day. You
It
have to
is
be
every
on top
day.
of it.
Mhm.
Um, and those things may be of varying degrees for different people. I mean, if
Mhm.
you can get up and just make your bed in the morning, that's a great place to start, right?
Mhm.
Seems like a little thing, but it's an accomplishment. I've done that for years now. If I don't accomplish anything else during the day, I have made my bed.
Mm.
And there is some solace in that. There is some positive thoughts that come out of that.
Mhm.
But it doesn't get easier, Star. As you know, it has to become a part of your life every single day. You have to be
Mhm.
responsible.
And you have to put yourself first, which we're not
Yeah,
hardwired to do.
that's right.
Not when we have families and employees and,
Hmm.
we're part of a community. It's like I've always been guilty of putting everyone else's needs before my own.
Yeah,
And if I had, if I had cancer, I would be in the oncology unit. But I
right.
have mental illness and I'm like, oh, no, I can deal with this on my own.
Yeah, they
No, I
sort of
can
leave,
deal with
leave it to
this.
your own thing.
Yeah,
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 you can
I'll
wing it.
just heal myself.
Yeah.
So we do have to change the way people think, and it starts
Well,
with
it has
us.
to become, I mean, it's a cliche now, but I mean, you need to maintain your mental and emotional wellness just like we do our physical wellness, in that there needs to be regular checkups, and the other thing is, and I mention this always, if you break your arm, you have a cast, that's a really, obvious physical sign to somebody else that you're obviously injured, and they
Mhm,
don't expect you to use that arm for anything, right?
mhm,
Well, however, when we're going through a mental illness or struggles, for some reason, we believe 100% everything that an injured brain tells us
mhm,
without thinking, where this is coming from, right? Um, it's just, we need to be super aware and micromanage your thoughts. You really need to micromanage your thoughts, because you will get inundated with negative self thoughts from an injured brain that have no basis in reality. But yet we will believe it 100% without even questioning it.
mhm.
You know what I mean?
I'll tell you what's really worked for me,
Mm,
and I consider myself incredibly fortunate, is my relationship with my spouse. So my husband also lives with mental illness. He has bipolar, um, and he was far more self-aware than I was, um, and knew about his triggers, knew about his warning signs, knew to recognize when, when things were starting to come to a head.
right.
Where I would always be, oh my God, I'm so surprised that I'm here, because didn't look at it like he's also an accountant. So,
Oh,
he writes things down and he keeps a mood
right.
journal and tracks his sleep and his exercise. And I tried doing that, but it became too competitive for me. I felt like I was competing with myself, and it just didn't work for me, but it works for him.
Yeah.
But we basically call each other out. Um,
Perfect.
and that has been so awesome. So when I see a sign in him, I will just say, "Hey, what's going on?" He'll say nothing. I'm fine. I'll say, "No, like that's one of your
Mm.
signs. Like,
Yeah.
what you're doing right now is out of the norm." And then he'll stop and he'll listen to me and he'll say, "You know what? You're right. I'm not going to go do that. I'm going to go upstairs and have a nap, or I'm going to
Right.
go for hop on my bike and go for a good cycle."
Mm.
And he does the same for me. He does the same for me. He has a list. He has, like, it's like the mental health continuum. If you look at that from the Mental Health Commission, the working mind,
Yeah.
it's the healthy, reacting, injured, ill. Um, so I have my own, and he has filled in, and I've agreed, and we've looked at it, like what my signs are when I'm healthy, when I'm reacting, when I'm injured, and when I'm ill. And we just had a conversation about this yesterday, that I was thinking that I was maybe reacting a little bit.
Hmm.
And he made me realize, no, I'm in the injured category right now. I'm just coming off COVID, ended up with an ear infection,
Yeah.
have some other crap going on health wise. Um, a hurricane,
Yeah.
uh,
Did you have any
staff
issues?
struggles.
Did
Like,
you?
I've been having a lot.
Yeah. Did you have any issues for me with this Hurricane Fiona? Even though I wasn't there, I was in I'm in Edmonton, but for me, it brought back all the memories of Juan,
Mm,
and this has ended up being like kind of a hard few days because it brought back all the Juan memories. Obviously, I was working as a paramedic then when that happened, losing John Rossiter in that
Yeah.
storm,
Yeah.
and sort of brought up all that stuff.
Mhm.
Did you have anything like that? Any of this, like the stress from Juan, sort of creep into this?
Uh, my I replayed it all in my head,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
what happened during one. For
Mm,
me, so my daughter she'll be 20 in December, so she was a baby during one.
right.
And I remember like heating up her bottles on the barbecue and being stressed about. This sounds so silly now when I play it back, but I have to get to work. Like, I'm performing brain surgery. I have to get to work and save lives. No, I'm a journalist. But
Yeah,
when things are going sideways, that's when people want to be able to listen to someone they know and trust.
right.
Like I listened to CBC radio nonstop all through Hurricane Fiona. Um, so it's more imperative than ever that I get to work at a time when I really should be home with my family. My power's out. I have a baby.
Mm.
But I
But
feel,
work is your comfort zone. Work is where you can go, and even though
yep,
it's important work, you can do it without really thinking much. You
you're
know what I
right.
mean?
Yep,
Yeah,
yep, you're right. So I did have a bit of that. And then I guess feeling the uncertainty again too, the
yeah,
uncertainty with Hurricane Juan. So I did feel that again. And my parents
mm,
are older, so
yeah,
it's different this time around too, because they still live in that small Pictou County area. My dad called me today, and it's the first time I've talked to him since the hurricane hit because they don't have cell phones. Urgh.
yeah,
And their landline
yeah.
doesn't work when the power goes out. They don't have water, they don't have telephone. But he got a neighbor's cell phone and called me and told me he's okay. So he's 76 and my mom's 74. So
Mm,
just that uncertainty.
yeah, for sure. Is there anything else? Like, have you ever dabbled in, meditation, or have you tried float therapy?
I have not tried float therapy.
Dude, you have to go to
Really?
Halifax Float Center. Yes, you have to go. It's
Wow.
um it's amazing. And people are probably getting sick of me telling this story too, but it's okay. It's amazing. Obviously you're in 1,100 pounds of Epsom salt, so it's just like the Dead Sea. You float. You can turn off all external stimuli. Um, and it's so great for your body as far as inflammation goes, the magnesium and the Epsom salt. So really good physically for you. It draws out a lot
Mhm.
of toxins. That first time you go, Starr, if you go, you may feel really sick, really nauseous partway through it. Just hold. You're gonna be fine. It's drawing out all the toxins. But then it's also a place where I practice my breath work. I practice my
Mm.
meditation, and usually fall asleep. It's like the best nap ever. But it's amazing. You should try it. Um, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if you like it. But yeah, it's been big
I
for
have
me.
heard a lot about it. I have friends who do it and swear by it, so
Yes, Jenna does it.
I'll have to try it.
Jenna goes to
Jenna,
float
yep, yep.
for sure. Um, Star, if people want to get in touch with the foundation in order
Mhm.
to pledge some money or help out, how can they do that?
It's as simple as visiting mentalhealthns.ca, mentalhealthns.ca. You can also pick up the phone and give us a call, 902-464-6000. If you need help, if you want to apply for funding, if you want to provide funding, if you have a brilliant idea, um, if you want to volunteer, share your time and your talents, reach out to us for sure. We'd love
Mm,
to hear from you.
beautiful. Star, this has been awesome. I just want to thank you. And I've been wanting to have you on now for seasons, but just wasn't the right time, didn't happen, but now it's finally happened. I loved this chat. So thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure, Sean. Thank you for what you do. It's really important. The foundation, when I started, part of our vision and our mission was to reduce stigma.
Mm,
And we've changed that. It's now to eradicate stigma.
yeah.
Like it's time. We're at the
No, it's
point
time.
now where like it just has to stop. And what you're doing with your podcast and sharing your story and reaching out to so many people is really, really helping in that direction to eradicate the stigma, to change the way
Well,
people think.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm just blessed to be able to talk to cool people and have them want to talk to me. But Star, if there's anything I can ever do or be associated with or to help you out on anything as far as from the podcast, I mean, I'm at your service. You just have to say the word. I would love to, but please keep at it. Keep doing the work that you're doing. It's so important. I'm super proud of you for doing the work that you do. We need it. So thank you.
Thank you.